Hey guys, all of us are shut indoors due to the COVID-19 pandemic and boredom is slowly starting to seep in. But today, I have with me something pretty interesting you can do during this lockdown. Have you ever wondered what the concept is behind our school logo? Well, that is what I'm going to share with you today. A tangram. Many of us may have come across this word before. A tangram is nothing but a Chinese geometric puzzle consisting of a square divided into 7 shapes, namely a parallelogram, a square, 2 small triangles, a medium triangle and 2 large triangles. Well, this may look familiar. Yes, our school logo is a tangram. Well, there is a very interesting story as to how the tangram was formed. Let me share it with you. Long ago, when your grandfather was a child, there lived a sage. A sage is a very wise person, and our sage is among the wisest. He was as cunning as a fox, as wise as an owl, and had the memory of an elephant. Because of this, the king assigned to him a very difficult and complicated task. He challenged the sage to transport a piece of glass to the royal palace. Now this may seem a very simple task to you, but the sage knew how difficult it was, for in between the royal palace and the kingdom lay the hottest of deserts, the widest of rivers, and the tallest of mountains. But the sage gladly accepted the challenge. Now you must all be wondering, why will the sage take so much pains just for a piece of glass? Back then, glass was not this common, and this was a very special glass, for it was perfectly square in shape. The sage wrapped the piece of glass in the most softest silk he could find to protect it from scratches. Before starting on his journey, he looked back at his humble house. He knew that he may not see it again. Nonetheless, he took the first step of the most difficult journey he was going to face. After a day's tiresome journey, he had reached the hottest of deserts he had ever seen. He looked to his right and all he could see was a desert. He looked to his left and all he could see was a desert. He looked straight ahead and all he could see was a desert. With the wisdom of a sage, he knew that he could not travel across a desert on foot. Thus, he found a camel for himself and travelled the rest of his journey on the camel's back. After days of strenuous riding, he had at last crossed the desert, and now he had reached the widest of rivers he had ever seen. He looked to his right and all he could see was a river. He looked to his left and all he could see was the river. He looked straight ahead and all he could see was the river. With the wisdom of a sage, he knew that he could not sail across the river on a camel's back. Thus, he built a boat for himself and sailed across the river. Now, after days of strenuous sailing, he had crossed the river, and now he had reached the tallest of mountains he had ever seen. He looked to his right and all he could see was mountains. He looked to his left and all he could see was mountains. He looked straight ahead and all he could see was mountains. Now, with the wisdom of a sage, he knew that he could not go around or under the mountain. Thus, he started climbing the mountain. After days of strenuous climbing, the sage had reached the peak of the mountain, and from there he could see his final destination, the royal palace. At that point of time, the sage's excitement made him forget where he was, and thus he stumbled upon a log and went rolling down the slope, head over heels, heels over head. As soon as he reached the ground, the first thing he did was unwrapping the silk cloth. And to his amazement, rather than shattering into millions of pieces, the glass had broken only into 7 pieces. The sage was shocked, and now he tried to arrange it back to its original shape, the square. At his first attempt, he got a rectangle. Then the sage got a triangle. Then he got a parallelogram. then a trapezium. And after hundreds of attempts, he had at last got what he desired, a square. Now, when the sage reached the royal palace, the king was overwhelmed looking at the silk package. But when he opened it, he was in for a shock, for the glass was broken. He was furious at the sage and demanded an explanation. The sage took the pieces of glass from the king and beautifully illustrated how he had travelled across the desert on the camel's back, how he had sailed across the river on the boat, and how he had climbed the mountain. The king was impressed in the way how the sage had illustrated his journey with the help of the broken pieces of glass, but he still demanded his window. The sage said that with these broken pieces of glass and a bit of imagination, you can make anything, may it be a window, a camel, a man, a boat, or anything. By this time, the king was too busy arranging the pieces to listen to the sage. The next day, the king announced this game as the official game of the kingdom. And thus Tangrams were born. Now you may have noticed that this whole story was illustrated with the help of Tangrams. Thus we understand that just like the sage said, with a bit of imagination and Tangrams, we can make anything. Hope you enjoyed the story. Now, I mentioned something about maths earlier. Yes, Tangrams do have a relationship with maths. Now, tangrams are used to solve puzzles that require the making of a specific shape only with the 7 pieces. This requires a lot of thinking, and thinking is the main key to success when it comes to maths. Also, when you look at a tangram, these shapes form a part of the square. Now, if I say this in mathematical terms, they form a fraction of the square. This can also be used as a teaching aid for fractions. Tangrams are also used as a tool when it comes to studying spatial analysis. Tangrams have much more relationships with maths. I have stated only a few. Did you even imagine that there was so much behind that small logo on your handbook? Yes, tangrams are a very interesting topic, and if you start exploring on them, the journey never ends. If you are very keen on playing the game, you do not need to go all the way to buying it. You can make it at home by drawing a tangram on a thick sheet of paper and cutting down the shapes.
Hey guys, today I am going to talk about the Tangi game. Tangi, the modern version of the classic tangram game. It helps a child to explore about geometric relationships. It also helps the child to create hundreds of geometric designs using all the 7 pieces. The objective of this game is to make shapes using all the 7 pieces of the tangram. The pieces must touch but not overlap. Is this tangram just a game? No, it's far beyond that. It helps us to develop the following skills: powers of keen observation, problem solving and work skills, concentration and reasoning, eye-hand coordination, and creativity.
These are the reasons Springdales chose a tangram to be its logo, so that we Springdales can shape ourselves beautifully and prepare for the future. What a wonderful concept it is. Now we will demonstrate to you how to play the Tangi game. Before moving on to playing the game, I will brief you on the technique of playing the game. We will be given a placard consisting of a shape made up of the 7 pieces of the tangram. We will have to recreate it to form a new shape. For example, I was given a fan and I recreated it to make a moving man. Similar placards are a puppy recreated to make a swan and a rabbit recreated to make a candle. Now both of us will show you how to play the game. We will pick up a shape and we will see who recreates it into the other shape fastest.
We are going to start the competition. We have to change this shape into a swan.
In a matter of 1 minute, an alarm will ring. Whoever finishes building the shape before the alarm wins. Both of us managed to finish it before a minute. This game kept us on our toes.
I thoroughly enjoyed this game. You should also play it.
Hope this video on mathematics was informative and hope you enjoyed it. Stay home.
Stay safe.